Welcome to the SoftCo Leaders Series, where we invite people from both industry and sport to give us their insights into leading business transformation or leading teams. The topic today is tackling uncontrolled spend, and I'm delighted to be joined by Amar Shah, who's the CFO from RJ O'Brien. Amar, thank you very much for joining me from Chicago. Are you a Bears fan, can I ask you?
I am. It's been a tough season, but I am a diehard fan, and there's always next year.
Last time we met, you explained to me that all your meeting rooms in RJ O'Brien are named after different counties in Ireland. I'd like you to share with everybody the serious faux pas of bringing a diehard person from Dublin into a Cork room. Tell us a bit about the background of that.
Yeah. So RJ O'Brien is a 100-year-old company, and there's a lot of history with this company. We are owned by the O'Brien family, and as part of our kind of workspace here in Chicago, we thought it would be unique to have a bunch of conference rooms, but name it after multitude of cities in Ireland. So I spent a great deal of time in Meath, which is a conference room here by my office, where we can collaborate. Yeah, but we have, that was something unique here, and we really wanted to tie it back to to our history, and we have all the cities in Ireland, and we were able to introduce you and have something that you actually understood when you came on site here in our office.
It was a lot of fun, really was, to say, okay, what room are we in? Please tell us. And you went Cork. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, as CFO of this very prestigious organization, tell me about what your role is, and also in particular your focus on automation.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit of kind of background of where I came from, but I'm my previous experience was in regulation, and we didn't really have the operational excellence when I took this role. So one of my first steps here was finding partners that did things much better than we were currently doing here. So as part of the CFO of RJ O'Brien, we looked at our AP automation, we looked at invoice processing, we looked at our budget software, we looked at our payout system, and we've been able to bring kind of automation in each one of these respective areas to RJO. And I've been continuing to push this mantra as I've kind of proceeded and progressed here at this company.
Well, you recently spoke at IFOL, a webinar, and you talked about technology and automation enabling your organization to grow. And I think most times people look at technology and think of front office. They don't always think of the middle and the back office. What's your particular view on that? Because it's kind of a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because what I've kind of experienced is, whenever there's an issue, everyone always comes back to finance saying, hey, finance, didn't book something properly, or there was a misallocation. The source of the data is always finance. So, that kind of made me a little bit mad when everyone would always come to finance. So I think one of my biggest things here was data quality, and kind of looking at technology and how to take all that data and put it in a systematic process, format to be able to kind of review and address, and really just to really understand was one of my biggest steps here. So I kind of mentioned all the different systems that we had brought. With SoftCo, we really looked at invoice automation. And, when I first joined, we had paper, and, someone would hand it and put it on our desk, and we'd process the invoice with very little included in that process, just paying it. And so when I really saw kind of what we were currently doing, I knew that was not sustainable. And once COVID happened, we really saw a huge kind of disconnect with our whole process, and that's where we kind of partnered with SoftCo to bring onto RJO a more automated process on invoice processing.
And where did you have the most issues? Because we're kind of talking about the uncontrolled
Yeah.
spend. Just maybe explain to people where were the big issues for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the spend is something that we really had to address. And 2020 is when we started the process. We can't really control volume. We can't control volatility. We can't control interest rates. And so, as a company that's been around 100 plus years, for us to be sustainable, we have to really look at discretionary spend. We have to be able to really address those things that we can control. And so what we did here at RJO was really look at the data in front of us and determine how we can cut certain things based on the information that we currently had. And there were some gaps there, and we kind of addressed those during our implementation of SoftCo. But we really looked at the uncontrolled spend of for example, T&E. That's something that we now, when we're doing our budget, we do a zero-based budget. So we don't really look at last year's spend and then say, all right, well, it's going to go up by 5 or 10%. We really look at our current projects in place, and that's really how we've approached, our kind of budget process, but also how to really control our spend is more zero-based budgeting.
Very good. And again, buy-in from people. Today, I was actually with somebody and we were discussing invoicing, and they said to me, just tell them to send the invoice to me. I went, no, I won't. People feel that way. Just send me the invoice as opposed to, no, please send it to finance. So how did you get people away from that thought process?
Oh, that's an entire behavioral change that we had to implement with the SoftCo process. So prior to SoftCo, and kind of mentioned the paper-based invoicing, those invoices would go to kind of the different business units and then eventually make their way to finance. More so, they would sit on someone's desk for a long period of time, and every now and then they'd be turned in much later than they were due, and so we saw system disruptions, we saw late payment penalties, we just saw really inefficiencies in the whole process. So as part of the SoftCo implementation, we had a huge behavioral change to say, hey, the invoice actually should go to finance. That should be the first place the invoice process should start, and that's what we've been able to implement. In the 1+ years that we've had SoftCo is now we get the invoices first, and then the process starts thereafter.
And where were the biggest problems? Was it your telephone bills, rent, contracts?
Yeah.
Where were the biggest challenges?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge, an invoice is an invoice, and so really getting the end users, the other outside of, other individuals outside of finance to really buy in, contacting their vendors, changing kind of some of those processes on their end to have and implement and interject finance. One of our highest expenses are IT related expenses, and all the different vendor relationships we have with IT. Whether it's kind of a market data related IT spend or some other type of technology. So really contacting each one of those vendors, seeing the intricacies of each one of those vendors, because they're all different. And I'll give you an example is, we have a lot of Bloomberg terminals here. Bloomberg has kind of a new contract for every user. So we have hundreds of users, so everyone has their own contract. And then they don't always start in the beginning of the month or the end of the month. They really can start anytime during the month. So really kind of identifying each one of these kind of invoices, these contracts, these expenses, finding the length of each one, who the users are, and ensuring kind of we have a really good process in place to kind of have those being sent to finance first was a real big challenge. And, we've been able to kind of now kind of right the ship and now kind of start kind of a new, more efficient process kind of going forward.
Fabulous. And you've international offices as well, all over Europe, Asia, and the US. How do you incorporate them in the process?
Yeah. So the international offices is kind of our next big real step here in kind of automation. What we found a challenge, and so we have during COVID, we actually purchased a company in Dubai, and Dubai is literally opposite time of the U.S. And when you're trying to kind of interact with one of our Dubai counterparts, there's always a delay, 1 day delay, and there's a lot of emails going back and forth. So that's still a big challenge for us. But having a centralized system and having a really solid process has been the basis of kind of this efficiency and kind of helping kind of the communication. It doesn't matter that you get the answer the next day. It's about our process, and the system that we've been implemented with SoftCo helped us kind of with that process. And now we are actually kind of in the mindset of having, kind of those communications with our different groups, more streamlined, whereas before they were very segmented and fragmented. And so we've been able to kind of break those barriers and kind of have kind of more of a streamlined discussion.
Great. You mentioned earlier on that you were firstly involved in sort of compliance, sort of the risk side of the business. Do you find, we see with many customers that their internal auditors flag manual processes. So has this kind of helped in relation to compliance? And, maybe what's the emphasis there in relation to that?
Yeah, so absolutely. One of our, anytime money leaves the door, money leaves the company, we have to have strict internal controls. And in our industry, we're a highly regulated company where there is a framework of any time an invoice is processed, where the payment goes, who changes those instructions, who touches the payment. So kind of I'd mentioned, prior we, in the paper-based world, we had a huge gap in controls, just based on the fact that someone can change something on a piece of paper and all of a sudden it gets processed and it could, have incorrect instructions. So we were able to kind of build, kind of more robust framework around our payment process. And that's kind of what we've done within the last, year is we've kind of really looked at internal controls and how we process invoices and having more of a global policy. Because before, what we had is we had each unit across the globe follow its own standard instructions, and having a policy that was very centric on that location, where now we have actually a global policy, and now we have a global risk department that can actually monitor kind of policy and implement change across the globe instead of one specific jurisdiction.
And is that why finance leading the project? This is a bit of a controversial one now for you, Amar. We would say that when finance drive a project, it's much greater success rate than, dare I say, IT. Given the regulatory emphasis within your organization, do you think finance leading the project makes a big difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if finance doesn't drive the change, it doesn't really get done until a point in time when there's an issue, when there's a fine, when there's a bad payment, when there's a system kind of disruption. And I think it's a really big deal for finance to be able to be the initiator of any process change, raise their hand and start that process, because we can see that if it doesn't happen, it won't get done. And when it does get done, it's because we're under kind of dire circumstances. And so we've had to make some changes here in finance, and we've kind of discussed a few different things, but having a really robust budget system, that's a finance driven change, and it impacts all the different departments here, whether it's back office or front office, but finance is the one who actually implemented that and kind of raised their hand. And we saw a need because we didn't have really good data. And so what does that mean? That's where we partnered with SoftCo to really help us not only centralize invoice processing, but really capture good data to be able to then make decisions going forward. We built a payout system here called Exactly. Again, we have, as a futures brokerage company, we have a lot of payouts where we make to our brokers, and having a centralized system that anyone can see at any point in time what their payout computation is, what makes up the payout, has been a big change for us, and it actually helps with transparency. You're not dealing with issues kind of during the close process when we're trying to close the books, and then there's a discrepancy on a payment, and all of a sudden you're going back and forth when you really should be looking at how to close and our financial records, how to post accruals, how to ensure our financial data and is accurate and complete. And so now kind of pushing things kind of during the month versus then doing it end of month has been a big change. So we've been able to build a lot of systems and leverage a lot of really best in class companies to really implement change here to help us, be here for another 100 years going forward. And that's, that's going to be our goal.
What's next? What are you planning to automate next?
Yeah, so we're really looking at payments. So in the US, we currently have a process where we've leveraged one of our partner banks to make payments to vendors. And I know during our kind of implementation of kind of our invoice processing, payments we always saw as a gap. What we had as people, staff in our treasury teams would go and take invoices and they would input them, in the actual banking portal. And it was a very manual process that led to a lot of, kind of fat fingering, whether it's the actual instructions, whether it's the dollar amount, whether it's the template. So now what we've actually built in the US here is a file that gets generated from our ERP system and sent to our partner bank. So the payments are actually accurate, they're correct, they're on time. And we don't really need anyone from another team to input. So we're actually trying to build that to other jurisdictions such as Dubai, such as London, such as France, and Canada, where we have all offices and invoices are all processed, in those respective jurisdictions. So that's one of our kind of next big things. We're also looking to go more cloud-based with our ERP system. So I'd mentioned, with our budget, SoftCo, Exactly, our broker system, they're all based on the cloud. But our current ERP infrastructure, our GL system is actually on-prem server. And now what we've actually been initiating is a project in 2023 to, kind of transition that to more of a cloud base. So get less of a footprint off of our IT stack and kind of leverage some of these partner relationships to really maintain our data and house our data within their kind of cloud infrastructure has been a really big push from a finance perspective.
Excellent. I've only two more questions for you. You can say few, thankfully. One of them is, what's a personal one? What's your leadership style?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've kind of grasped here is listening. I think that's a very important thing that as leaders, we tend to forget listening to kind of other individuals, whether they're on our team, whether they're outside our team. As CFO here, sometimes we always think that we know everything and we have all the right answers, and that's never the case. And I really took that to heart when, again, I'd come from a regulatory background, and when we do from a regulation is we look from the top down. So we're looking at a number on a financial record, and then we're trying to take one layer below that. We rarely go all the way down to the invoice level. We rarely go down to the actual contract level. And then we rarely go down to the actual budget level. So I was able to see kind of that disconnect when I came here, and we have to build things from the ground up. And so it's a whole mentality shift. And so for me to leverage others on the team who have much more insightful knowledge, I think I do a really good job of listening. And my door is always open. I do a lot of interactions with the team. So I do come to the office. I still do brainstorm with others on the team. I think that's a very important aspect. I don't ever think I can come back to the office 5 days a week. I feel like, times have changed. But I really feel value in looking someone, on a face-to-face perspective, and kind of not only through, kind of a Zoom lens or on the phone. I think that's very important to me. So I still cherish my kind of face-to-face meetings with my team members.
You're absolutely right. I'm certainly more back in the office myself, but we nearly had my dog join us on this meeting, by the way. That's the difference the world has come to. Lastly, what are your top 3 tips to companies embarking on tackling that whole area of the uncontrolled spend?
Yeah.
The non-PO, some people refer to it as maverick spend. So what is your top 3 tips?
Yeah. So I think the first 2 are pretty standard. Having a cross-functional team is always key. From a finance perspective, we look at numbers, but we don't really understand the relationships behind those numbers. And there could be, and we need to understand what those are. So as part of RJO in 2020, we created a huge cross-functional team to look at maverick spend, and we were able to kind of reduce spend materially across all sectors of RJO. So having a good cross-functional team to look at spend is very important. Having data quality is very important. And that's where kind of we've leveraged our partnership with SoftCo to better, to have better kind of data in front of us to make those decisions. And then I think the third is like challenging the status quo. It's always easy for us to kind of follow what's always been done, and kind of move forward to the next year or kind of next month, but really looking at this what the status quo is and reassessing the situation is a big deal. And for a company that's been around 100 plus years, we've always had to do that, and we continue to do that. When I first started with RJO, we had an auditor, KPMG. We've had them for 20 plus years, and so my very first year, I had that kind of discussion relationship with them, and I really thought, wait, there's other partners out there. Let's just see who else is out there, and let's actually give KPMG a chance. Ultimately, we decided to move on from KPMG, and I think that's been one of our better decisions in the last 5 years. But that decision really didn't happen until someone made that initiation of a change. It's always coming from finance. Usually, again, if it happens after finance, it's sometimes never a good thing. But really challenging yourself, challenging your team members, challenging how you think of things is a big deal. And looking at kind of uncontrollable spend, I really I really think that companies can do better just by really reassessing where they're at and not just going with the status quo.
Excellent. Challenging the status quo. We'll change the title of this to that for you. How about that? Amar, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And let's hope that the Bears have a great season.
Yeah, no, Susan, thanks very much. I really appreciate, you taking time and visiting us in our offices. And hopefully we'll be seeing, more of you and your team members. But yeah, no, thank you very much, and have a great week.
You too. Thanks a million.